Good morning, everyone. We're glad that you've joined us. I'm Lucy Bunch, one of the ministers honored to serve the Unitarian Universalist Society of Sacramento. With us this morning is our preacher, the Reverend Roger Jones. Our worship associate is Jed Shapiro, and our wonderful pianist, Irina Chonseva. Our technical staff are Dirk Toole and Ivan Caballero. If you are new to us, we are so glad you're here this morning, and we'd like to get connected with you. If you want to receive our weekly messages, please fill out our newcomer form. You can get to it at uuss.org/newcomers. You can see this address in the chat box at the bottom of your screen. Our official greeter this morning is Stephanie Maslowski. If you type "I'm new" in the chat box, Stephanie will reach out to you with a private message so you can get connected to our congregation. Although our buildings are closed, our hearts are open and our congregation is active. Go to uuss.org to check out our weekly message and our online calendar for all the information about what's going on. This Tuesday, we have our Vesper service at 7 p.m. The theme is Wonder Women in Our Lives. So please join Susie Masroll and Karen Sparrow for what I'm sure will be a wonderful service. Then on Wednesday, we have our Wellspring Wednesday session. This week, it's our Exploring UU class, especially for newcomers and those who want to learn more about Unitarian Universalism. Karen Gunderson will lead the session this week on social justice. How do we live our values as Unitarian Universalists? You can join either of these events, 7 p.m. in the same Zoom room where you entered for this service this morning. And I want to thank the more than 100 people who stayed for our congregational meeting last Sunday. We passed a new budget, we elected officers, and voted to approve a resolution supporting the proposed 8th principle of Unitarian Universalism. Thanks to all who worked to make that meeting a success. And we're gathering again for another congregational meeting on June 13th, right after the service. We will be voting on whether to ordain our former student minister, Sanjay Hawk, to the UU ministry. Sanjay will be preaching that day, so please mark your calendar for June 13th to hear Sanjay preaching, and then our special short meeting after the service. And now let's welcome Jed Shapiro, our worship associate, and Sally White, our board president, who will offer a chalice lighting reading. Good morning, Jed. Good morning, Sally.
Good morning, Lucy.
Good morning. This will be a great time as we prepare to light the chalice. If you're going to join at home, get your chalice and lighting materials as Sally leads and I lead response for the chalice lighting.
So I'll read the leader part, and Jed, you're going to do the response with everyone else?
Yes, I am.
All right. We kindle this flame, the symbol of our shared search for truth and understanding.
In times of celebration, may its brightness reflect our gratitude.
In times of need, let its warmth renew our connections to one another and the spirit of life.
In times of confusion or uncertainty, may its fire bring us courage and commitment.
May our values call us forward into better days together. And now Irina will play for us.
Good morning, everyone. It's great to be with you today. Let us sing together a hymn that you know so very well. It's Wake Now My Senses, and it is 298 in our great hymnal, and we will sing all 5 verses. Short introduction. And let's begin.
At this time, we bring our joys and sorrows, our worries, griefs, and gratitude into this beloved community. If you would like to tell this community what's on your heart this morning, please open the chat box at the bottom of your screen and type in what it is you would like to share. Please make sure that your message is going to everyone. Those of you on Facebook may share among yourselves while we all enjoy a gift of music from Irina. Let us begin. Thank you all for sharing what's on your heart this morning. Let's take a couple of deep breaths together and let them out with a sigh. It's a beautiful spring here in Sacramento. And as more people are vaccinated, many of us are feeling the energy of renewal and possibility. And at the same time, we're aware that the transitions to come will be challenging as we re-enter into community. Many of us are simply exhausted by a year of stress and worry and childcare and just having a hard time feeling ready for whatever comes next. And some of us are holding all these feelings at the same time. So let's hold this complexity with a loving touch and an open heart as we share a time of prayer. Holy Spirit of love, bless us with your healing presence. Help us to let go of the fear and the stress that we have been holding for a long time. Help us to find some peace and to settle ourselves as we prepare for what is to come. Spirit of life, which rejuvenates and refreshes us, send us the fresh winds of possibility to blow away our worries and restore our spirits. Spirit of love, let the fire of love burn brightly in our hearts and inspire us to act with courage when we counter injustice in our world. Let love be our conscience and our guide as we go forth. Help us to be kind to all who cross our path, everyone who crosses our path. Spirit of love, may you give us the power to trust, the power to hope, and to persevere. May we always be with you, Great Spirit, great source that holds and sustains us all. And may you always be with us, Great Spirit of love. Let us know fully and completely that there is a love holding us. There is a love holding all that we love. There is a love holding all. May we rest in this love. Amen. And now let us take a moment of silence to reflect on the prayers in our own hearts. Blessed be.
Good morning, everybody. It's good to be with you. Happy Sunday. Our Soul Matters theme for this month of May is story. The parable is one of the most enduring types of story. The parable is a narrative which raises questions for us about values and priorities, responsibilities, and relationships. For Jesus of Nazareth, parables were teaching tools for his encounters with crowds of people. His parables used examples and images that could be understood by ordinary people. Textile workers, for example, for whom images of weaving would be second nature. Bakers who relied on the workings of yeast. Shepherds, farmers, and fishers. Nobody wrote the parables down as he spoke them. They were passed along in spoken word for decades after his death, passed down by oral tradition. The fact that so many of them ended up in the gospel books of the New Testament indicates how memorable and provocative they were. The parables became important for the Christian movement, but that's not how they started. Jesus was a Jewish teacher speaking primarily to Jewish listeners. Of course, in the first century, the Mediterranean world of the Roman Empire was a place of cultural exchange and ethnic variety. In the province of Palestine, therefore, there may have been soldiers or other employees of the Roman regime in the crowds, but Jesus was speaking mainly to Jews, speaking as a Jew. Over the centuries, however, many Christian writers and preachers have interpreted the parables as Christian stories, often as allegories. In an allegory, each character represents something else or somebody else. Allegories are coded stories. To figure them out, you need a secret map or key or decoder to know who stands for what. Unfortunately, as the New Testament scholar Amy Jill Levine points out, many early Christian writers and preachers made the parables into allegories that were anti-Jewish. Some preachers still do that. Yet they're not allegories. The characters in a parable are not symbols of other people. They are what they are, and they speak to us as we are. Though a parable is not a coded message, it still can be perplexing, confusing, unsettling. As we engage with the story, Levine says, first we must try to hear the parables through an imagined set of first century ears, Jewish ears. And then we try to understand them so that they can be heard speaking in our own lives. Today, I will show a little bit about how Professor Levine does that with one of the parables. And our worship associate, Jed, will share a memory that that parable has prompted in him. First, I want to show a couple of examples of the lasting power of a parable as artists give it new life. And one of the most famous parables has become known as the parable of the Good Samaritan. And I won't say much about that one this morning. It does deserve a sermon of its own. So for now, just a couple of pictures. So on this slide is a modern painting of a scene of that story by the Jesus Mafa community in Cameroon. On the next slide, you will see a painting from the late 17th century by the Dutch artist Vincent Van Gogh. So many artists have shaped their own interpretations of the parables and their own relationships to them. And so can you. So can every one of us. Whoever we might be, we can imagine ourselves into the parables. We can pause to wonder if we have experienced any of the feelings or events taking place in a parable. We can ask ourselves and one another, what would you think? Or how would you act in the situation described in the story. If you were this person or you were that person, what would your perspective be? What would your experience be? The point of parables, Levine says, is that they tap into our memories, our values, and our deepest longings. If they are unsettling, they are doing their job. First, when we encounter a parable, we should let go of any of our accustomed understandings of it, what we have received from the culture that we're in, and try to encounter the stories as the first listeners did. Don't look for an explanation, look for an opening. Levine is a professor of New Testament studies at Vanderbilt University's Divinity School, and she's Jewish. She's an expert in the relationship of Judaism to the development of early Christianity. Yet even as a scholar in the field, Levine herself says, "The more I study the parables, the more challenged I am by them." Next in our service, we will hear a parable. Whether you have heard a version of this parable before or not, try to notice all the characters included in it and consider what thoughts or feelings they prompt in you. And Lucy will read us the parable.
This is a parable of Jesus of Nazareth from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 15. This version is a translation from the Greek New Testament into English by Amy Jill Levine. Some man had 2 sons, and said the younger of them to the father, "Father, give me the portion of the property that is falling to me." And the father divided between them. And after not many days, gathering together all, the younger son took a journey into a far region, and there he scattered the property through excessive living. And having spent all, there was a strong famine in that region, and he himself began to be in need. And going, he became joined to one of the citizens of that region. And the man sent him into his field to feed the pigs. And the young man was desiring to be filled from the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one was giving to him. And coming to himself, he said, "How many hired laborers of my father are abounding of bread, but I, by famine, here am lost. Getting up, I shall go to my father, and I shall say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. Am I still worthy to be called your son?' And rising up, he went toward his father. And yet when he was far off, his father saw him and had compassion, running, fell upon his neck and continually kissed him. And the son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. Not still am I worthy to be called your son.' And the father said to his slaves, 'Quickly, carry out a robe, the first, and put it on him, and give the ring to his hand and sandals to his feet. And bring the calf, the grain-fed one, sacrifice, and eating we may rejoice. Because this, my son, was dead, and he came back to life. He had been lost and was found.' And they began to rejoice. And his son, the elder, was in the field. And as he, coming, drew near to the house, he heard symphony and chorus. And calling over one of the servants, he inquired what these things might be, and said to him, 'Your brother has come, and your father has sacrificed the grain-fed calf, because he received him healthy.' And he became angry. He did not want to go in. And his father, going out, sought to urge and comfort him. And answering, he said to his father, look, all these years I am slaving for you, and not one commandment of yours have I passed by. And for me, not one goat did you give, so that my friends I might rejoice. But when your son, this one, the one who ate up your life with whores, came, you sacrificed for him the grain-fed calf. And the man said to him, child, you are always with me, and everything that is mine is yours. But it remains necessary to cheer and to rejoice, because your brother, this one, was dead and lived to life, and being lost, even he was found. This ends our story.
Thank you, Lucy. Our congregation has a tradition of practicing generosity by giving away half of all offering donations every month to a community partner, not-for-profit organization. And in this month of May, we are supporting the Nature Center, the FEA Nature Center in Ansel Hoffman Park. And many of our congregants are involved as volunteers, and many like to visit it. We have a brief video from that site prepared by Rich Howard and Mary Howard.
Many of you know that the FEA Nature Center is a wonderful place to experience the flora and fauna of the American River. The Nature Center also focuses on the original inhabitants of this area who lived here hundreds of years ago, the Maidu. I'm standing before the Maidu grinding rock, which is one of the artifacts that we have here in our village. We bring students from underprivileged schools and anyone who is welcome to come to the Nature Center and just allow yourself to go back in history and to just be a part of nature. We encourage you to support the Nature Center, both in your presence and in your monetary donations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. And on this slide, you can see how you can donate to the shared offering through our website. You can text your donation through the number there, and you can call the office, or you can mail a check to UUSS here on Sierra Boulevard. Thank you for your generosity to our shared offering. And Lucy will lead us in singing our response to the offering.
Please join me in our shared response. May the spirit of gratitude bless and multiply all that we have, all that we give, and all that we receive.
Thank you, Lucy. It is so easy to think that we know what a parable is about. After 2,000 years of artistic interpretation, of references in casual conversation and sermons preached with confident assertions, it's easy to think we know what a parable means. Consider, for example, the parable known by the famous title, The Prodigal Son. We heard Lucy read it without the title. Jesus' listeners wouldn't have known it by that name. It was given that name by an early church father, St. Jerome. He gave it that name 350 years after Jesus told it. Yet the name has the weight of centuries of repetition, including through artworks like a late 17th century painting by Vincent Van Gogh, which is called The Return of the Prodigal Son. And some of our piano music today comes from Christian songs written from the perspective of the wayward son who returns after losing everything when he's near death. For some Christians, this story is a drama of sin, repentance, and forgiveness. But in the view of New Testament scholar Amy Jill Levine, it is a family drama. She urges a better title for it: The Parable of a Man Who Lost a Son. Now, in this story, as we heard, the younger son asks for his inheritance early before his father's death so that he can move away. The father agrees, although he could refuse, or at least advise the son that that's not a good idea, but he doesn't. Levine says that requesting your inheritance early was not a sin, and it was not uncommon among Jews of the first century, even if it wasn't a good idea, if it was not wise. So the Greek word in the gospel text for what the father gives is the word life. This shows the significance of the gift. He divided the life between them. With his money, the kid grabs his stuff and leaves. The parable has no words about a farewell gesture or embrace, and then he squanders his money. The parable gives no evidence that he uses any of the money according to the values of generosity or charity or helping others with compassion, all of which are part of the Jewish law. He just uses it up. And then a famine comes to the land and he nearly dies. He gets a job feeding pigs. This detail shows us that he's far from home, that he's in an area that is not majority Jewish. However, according to Levine, he is not violating dietary or purity laws as a Jew, as he's not eating the pigs or slaughtering them. He's just feeding them, and he's thinking the pigs have it pretty good. In his hunger, he envies the regular feedings of garden scraps which they get. He thinks about the servants of his father back home eating their fill of fresh bread. He comes to himself. He decides to go back, and he plans to beg his father to take him on as an employee. He actually rehearses his apology, and when he gets there, he says exactly the same words. "Not still am I worthy to be called your son," he says. Levine suspects that this self-centered young man is not sincere. He's only betting that if he seems contrite, his dad will indulge him one more time. This is not the view of Christian rock songs and classic paintings. They show a repentant sinner returning, confessing, and surrendering himself. In any case, the dad sees him coming up the road and runs out to meet him. He falls upon his son's neck and kisses him continually. He says to his servants, "Put a ring on my son's hand and sandals on his feet. Put him in a robe, the first one." Levine points out that if the father has more than one robe, this Jewish family is doing well. "Slay the grain-fed calf," the dad says. "Let's throw a party." Clearly, the father is relieved and happy to have back a son who was lost. Here at UUSS, 5 years ago, I was co-leading a program for youth in their early high school years, which we call Coming of Age. Each youth was matched with a volunteer adult mentor, and all of us would meet after church once a month. At one session, I talked about Jesus of Nazareth. To give a sense of how Jesus taught, I introduced this parable about the man who had 2 sons. We broke into small groups, each with 2 youth and 2 adult mentors. I had them read the story again and then reflect on a few questions, taking turns. Questions such as, I wonder what you think of this story. I wonder which character you identify with. I expected the story to be familiar to the adults, but not to the youth. I wanted them to wrestle with it. I expected the oddness of it would jump out at the youth, and then the adults would help to draw out their feelings and thoughts about it. But the reaction I heard was not the one I expected. It was the adults who reacted. They balked at the father's indulgence of the young son who goes away and returns. It's not fair. The dad is neglecting him. Of course, this is exactly the purpose of a parable, to engage us in the story, and it did. Without my intention, our protesting adults showed our youth what it means to think and feel your way into a parable of Jesus. So, those who spoke up were onto something. Those protesters saw the perspective of the older brother, the son who stays, the one who isn't seen until almost the end of the story. The story says that this one just can't find it in his heart to rejoice at the news of the younger one's return. In the story, the older brother is working in the field. His brother doesn't stop by to see him on the way home. The father doesn't come out to tell him the news or call him in for the party. Nobody comes to him. Only as he gets near the house does he notice the loud celebration. What's going on? He asks. A servant explains. Their father is throwing a big celebration because he's happy the younger son has come back in one piece. As a suitable title for this parable, as I noted, Amy Jill Levine suggests this one, The Father Who Lost a Son. But then she adds perhaps it should be the father who lost 2 sons, the one who went away and the one who stayed and felt invisible. The loyal older son is angry, so he doesn't go inside. The father comes out to him to urge him and to comfort him. But first he has to hear him out. Perhaps the son screams, "Look, all these years I'm slaving for you, never breaking your commandments. You couldn't so much as give me a goat for me to have a party with my friends. But when this one, the one who ate up your life with whores, when he came, for him you sacrificed the grain-fed calf." No wonder the parables have not faded away in 2,000 years. The emotions and situations are strong and familiar. This family drama needs reconciliation. The father finally addresses the older son's feelings of being ignored and unappreciated. "Child," he says, "child, you are always with me. Everything that is mine is yours." In other words, he says, we belong to each other and we always have. Everything that is mine is yours. Even so, he tries to explain, it remains necessary to celebrate because your brother was dead and is alive. He was lost and he is found. We don't know any more than this. It's clear that he cares about both sons, even if the way he demonstrates that love has been messed up. We can only hope he's learned his lesson about the need to appreciate his loyal older son and celebrate him as well. Amy Jill Levine urges us to try to hear each story in the raw experience of the first listeners. If we appreciate that they were ordinary people, we can allow ourselves to enter the story too. If you were that character, what would be your experience? Or what about the other character? What would be your perspective if you were that person? Or imagine that you were the character without many words in the story. What would you be thinking? We need not narrow down a parable to just one meaning. To do so, Levine says, is to domesticate it, to put it in a narrow box. Rather, when we allow ourselves to wonder and reflect on it, we are giving it new life. When we open ourselves to be provoked and even unsettled by it, then we are giving it a chance to give us a new perspective on life. Furthermore, maybe we shouldn't narrow down the stories of our own lives to just one interpretation or one conclusion or one perspective. Our lives and the lives of those with whom we share our lives have many angles, many oddities, and many openings for reflection, curiosity, wonder, and humility. There's always more to see, more to imagine, more to consider. May we live with hearts open to the perplexing and rich mysteries that we are. May we see our own lives not as problems to solve and not as questions to answer once and for all. Let us consider our lives as mysteries to appreciate every day that we are given to live. So may it be. Blessed be, and amen. And next, Jed will offer a reflection after we have a gift of music from Irina.
Thank you. And now we'll get back to just Shapiro for reflection.
I called my friend Bob, just hanging out late one mindless afternoon, waiting impatiently to start my first college classes. He had a menial summer job just like me, as we both awaited our higher education. I talked him into a drive with no specific destination. This took some persuasion, as he'd had hernia surgery the week before. We left Phoenix behind and drove far north on a paved 2-lane highway leading to an increasingly remote area. Noting the passing dirt side roads that led into the desert unknown, I suggested we turn off on one. Again, Bob was reluctant, but grudgingly agreed. As dusk approached, I had driven too far and was going too fast when our headlights revealed a dry ravine ahead. Panic braking on the soft dirt made dust fly, hearts pound, and brought us to a sliding stop with the car's front wheels hanging over the edge. I made multiple attempts to get that car unstuck, but was completely unprepared. No tools, no water, no flashlight. Cell phones hadn't been invented yet, and nobody knew where we had gone. Heck, I wasn't quite sure where we were myself. Bob didn't like this next part. Our only option was to walk back to the paved road by moonlight. Understandably, this took a long time, accompanied by intermittent complaining. Too late, I learned on our long walk that Bob's post-op instructions were, "Don't exert yourself." Finally, we reached pavement, which was a relief, but we still needed a ride. One look at us, dusty, shivering, fatigued teens, I hoped would confirm that we were harmless. After quite a while, a lone car came by and we flagged it down. Thankfully, a restaurant cook headed home after his shift offered a ride to an intersection where at least I recognized the street names, although it was still barely back to civilization. Close enough. It was way past midnight by the time we were dropped off at a closed gas station. I reluctantly dropped coins into the payphone, knowing it would wake up my sleeping parents. Dad answered, listened to my brief description of the situation, then spoke few words to confirm our location so he could pick us up. As he disconnected, I heard my mom's anxious voice in the background, "David, what is it?" I felt terrible. We were still over a half hour from my parents' house, which allowed plenty of time to contemplate the mess I'd made, wonder whether my car would be stripped overnight out in the desert, and work up some fear of the reaction my dad seemed to be containing for now. We welcomed the warmth of my dad's car. He said, "We'll have to get your car tomorrow," and then corrected himself, "later today when it's light." We rode in silence. My friend Bob couldn't get out of the car fast enough when we dropped him off. It was after 2 a.m. when I fell into bed. At 6 a.m., Dad shook me awake, already dressed and a little too chipper. "Let's go get your car," he said. I pulled on clothes and found him in the garage, collecting stuff we'd need. He already had a rescue plan. The low sun angle accentuated the desert landscape's dramatic beauty, but I couldn't take it in. I had to get the conversation behind me. Finally, awkwardly, I blurted it out. "Dad, thanks. Thanks for helping me and picking me up, and I'm sorry I had to wake you, and I was stupid. I'll take whatever punishment you think I deserve." He drove in silence for a moment or two, then quietly said, "I think you've already been punished enough." I couldn't believe it. He glanced at me sideways with a subtle Cheshire cat smile, maybe a memory of some bonehead thing he'd done at my age. We worked together to get the car unstuck. With the right persuasion, my car popped back from the brink like a champagne cork. I was amazed and thankful. Just one more situation where my dad had the right approach. On the solo ride home, my thoughts wandered to whether I'd have a son someday, whether I would summon my dad's acceptance and composure. What a great role model. I miss him, his wisdom, and his love.
Thank you, Jed. Our closing hymn is led by Mary Howard, and we will sing along with the slides on the screen.
Come, thou fount of every blessing. Come, thou fount of every blessing, tune our hearts to sing thy grace. Streams of mercy never ceasing, call for songs of loudest praise. While the hope of life's perfection fills our hearts with joy and love, teach us ever to be faithful. May we still thy goodness prove. Come, thou fount of inspiration, lift our eyes to what may come. See the lion and the young lamb dwell together in thy home. Hear the cries of war fall silent, feel the love glow like the sun. When we all serve one another, then our heaven is begun. Come, thou fount of inspiration, turn our lives to higher ways. Lift our gloom and desperation, show the promise of this day. Help us bind ourselves in union, help our hands tell of our love. With thine aid, O fount of justice, earth be fair as heaven above.
Now I invite you to reach out to me, reach out to one another, knowing that we are connected. For all who see God, may God go with you. For all who embrace life, may life return your affection. And for all who seek a right path, may a way be found and the courage to take it step by step, moment by moment, breath by breath, one day at a time. Blessed be. Namaste and amen.
We extinguish these flames, but not the light of truth, the warmth of love, or the fire of commitment. These we hold in our hearts until we are together again.